Welcome. My name is Brad Hill, and I'm so excited to be joined by my buddy Brian Gill. And we are very excited to have Wess Stafford on us. Dr. Wess Stafford, President Emeritus. What a great term. I like that term. President Emeritus of Compassion International. Son of missionaries to the Ivory Coast. Wess grew up as one of the village children cared for by wise and loving African extended families. He also has degrees from Moody Bible Institute, Biola University, a master's degree from Wheaton College, and a Ph.D. from Michigan State University. Wess is also a veteran, having served 4 years in the U.S. Army as a linguist in the military intelligence. Wess joined the staff of Compassion International in 1977 and worked with the ministry both overseas and at headquarters. He served as president for 20 years. He's also an avid outdoorsman, a committed family man living on a small ranch near Colorado Springs, Colorado, with his wife, Donna, who was a Compassion sponsor even before she met Wess. They have 2 daughters, Jenny and Katie, the 2 children in the world of whom Wess is the greatest advocate of all, he says. Wess often says, everything I really need to know to lead a multinational organization I learned from the poor growing up in an African village. Thanks so much for taking time to join us today, Wess.
Thank you, Brad. My life just flashed before my eyes. Usually that's a bad sign.
Yeah, there's a lot packed into that intro right there.
There's an awful lot, but I figured it merited being said.
We're so thankful that you're joining us today, Dr. Stafford. And we're, one of the things.
Just Wess. Dr. Stafford scares me.
Okay, we'll say Wess. I'll do that. One of the things that we say about this podcast is, that we find clarity in the stories we tell and the adventures that shape us. Brad and I, we grew up in the outdoors. We love to do all things outdoors. It's not just limited to hunting and fishing, but you being an outdoorsman yourself, what are some stories, or is there a story that has shaped you from the outdoors, or how has God used the outdoors to impact your life and to shape your life?
Well, I was pondering that question this morning and thinking back to where my life actually got shaped, and you mentioned it in the introduction. I grew up missionary kid in the Ivory Coast of West Africa. And we were way out in a remote part of the Sahara Desert. Typical day was like 120 degrees. We had no electricity. We had only outdoor plumbing, the outhouse. The running water we had was me running with a bucket between my knees back and forth between the house. And our house was just a little cinder block thing with a tin roof over it. So when I think how important was the outdoors as my life was being shaped, turns out I spent almost all my time outdoors as a little boy. There was really nothing indoors. We had a little cot I slept on. Our dining room table was a card table. So there wasn't much indoors. So like all the other kids in the village in which I grew up, I spent my time outdoors, and wow. It was a great way. It was a great way to grow up. All of us little African boys. I considered myself an African boy, even though I was the wrong color. My sister and I were the only white children for about 100 miles.
Wow!
And that 100 miles was just 2 ruts through the elephant grass. Took you all day to drive that far. But us little guys, we hunted every day. We fished every day. We worked in the fields every day. Everything was outdoors. We really couldn't grow livestock. We couldn't have chickens and rabbits and such because there were pythons, there were panthers that would always try to get anything you tried to raise domestically. So if we wanted to have meat or fish, it pretty much depended on how well could we hunt.
Wow.
And that's I think you guys might get a kick out of this. This is what we hunted with.
Oh, the old slingshot.
slingshot. You never saw me as a little boy growing up in that village without this thing around my neck within easy reach, because you just never knew when there was something you're going to have to get. We were deadly accurate with those things. And then we had another kind here. I don't know if you've ever seen these, but this is the sling I used when I was a little boy.
Wow.
Yeah, you had that with us out there in out in Wyoming, and you were showing us how you used to. That thing was awesome. So that's a classic sling, right?
Yeah, I taught a few guys out there how to shoot marshmallows. Anyway, as I recall, Brad, there were way too many glass windows at that place for us to sling rocks.
What's something that you've been at? What's your prize shot with a slingshot?
With a slingshot, this is small game. This is a small caliber. But we used to shoot quail. We used to shoot doves. We shot rabbits with these things. This is what we saved for big game. With this, we used to shoot baboon.
Oh my goodness!
And gazelle. And if we got something small out hunting, well, our family had something to eat that night. But if we got something big, well, it got shared with the whole village.
That's right.
And it all depended on how good you could shoot that day.
That's the kind of sling I imagine David having. As he taking on the Goliath.
This came out of the Middle East. Not far from Israel. So I am pretty sure it's made out of sisal. I made this myself. It's about 65 years old. But I'm pretty sure that as he was herding sheep, David had access to the very same materials. And he probably used a sling exactly like that.
That's incredible.
So fun, because that is one deadly weapon. People think of the story of David and Goliath, and that this little boy, and all he had was this little sling. And I'm like, no, the guy you should pity was Goliath. That was not the story of a little boy and a lot of faith. That was a story of a stupid giant and let a little boy get near him with one of those things. He was outgunned. Absolutely no question in my mind about that.
That's awesome.
I feel like David had a lot of practice there herding the sheep. He could probably hit that thing pretty right where he wanted it.
I'm absolutely. In fact, as long as we digress down this line, I remember my mother teaching us little village boys the story of David and Goliath. And she was going on and on about, this is a story about a little boy and a lot of faith. And we were all sitting there under this mango tree with our slings over our shoulders thinking, no, we don't think that's what this story is about at all. We think this is a stupid giant. And I used to lie in bed at night thinking, I could have done that. Given this big opportunity. Man. She said he was 9 feet tall. He had a head the size of a dinner plate. I could have brought down that big boy. Yeah, as could any village slingshotter in our village.
That's incredible, Wes.
So we used them all day long. I mean, we were outdoors all day long. I slung dozens of rocks every day. In fact, I have my theory why David picked up 5 stones in that creek before he went across. I went to Moody Bible Institute. They were teaching us all these theological reasons for that. He had 5 brothers, or it was about this or that in history. And I'm like, no, he was a slingshotter just like me. And he probably just saw, whoa, there's 5 good rocks right here. I'm not going to pass up any of these. So he knew he only needed one. But you never passed up a good rock.
There you go. Got to keep the ammo at the ready.
Absolutely.
Wes,
so that's how that was how my days were spent as a little guy, outdoors, hunting and fishing, and really, really close to nature. We had obviously without electricity, we had no radio, we had no television. My daughters could not believe we had no DVDs, but we were very, very close to nature, and it was a big part of our lives.
Yeah. So in that line that you say, like, the things that you learned to run a multinational organization like a Compassion, you learned from the poor of Africa. What's some of those lessons from living amongst those people that really shaped the way you ran Compassion for those years?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brad. Um, they had a saying in our village. It takes the whole village to raise a child. And while I was the wrong color, mind you, I still was a child, and every child belonged to every grown up.
Mm.
And so all of us were the kids of everybody. I never fell down as a little guy in that village without some African swooping in, picking me up, drying my tears, sending me on my way.
Yeah.
And I didn't get away with a lot of mischief because I stood out. Being the only white kid in a whole group of little black kids. Anytime we got into mischief, they could blend in, but I couldn't. In fact, I remember one time as we gathered around the campfire in the evening, the village chief said, the goats are a little skinny this year, and it's not because we're in a drought for a change. It's because I think the little boys are chasing them all around the village. And he said, I don't know, in the swirling red dust, I don't know who all the culprits are, but I know this, that little white boy right there, he was one of them. I was like, oh, Lord, please, I need some camouflage here. And I used to pray every night, Lord, and I know you can do this. You brought down the walls of Jericho. You parted the Red Sea. You can do anything. When I wake up in the morning, let my skin be black like all of my friends. And it would be the first thing I would check every morning. I'd be, still white.
Still white.
But they taught me not only how to hunt and how to fish and how to relate to nature, but they taught me everything they taught their children. And among the things that I drew, that I used to lead Compassion's worldwide ministry, I had the honor of being its president for 20 years. I've been a part of it now for 45 years. And by the way, Brad, that the President Emeritus title they gave me,
yeah,
I accepted that because it felt like a big honor. I heard the word merit in there, emeritus. Turns out it only means old guy.
Hey,
old guy. So I've seen 45 years of Compassion's 70 years, and had the privilege of leading it for 20 of those years. So the things that I drew from that village were things like love. I tried to have Compassion be a very loving organization. People could feel it when they walked into our offices around the world. But I learned that from the poor. And the poor taught me about love. They said, love is the strangest thing, Wes. The more of it you give away, the more of it you get.
Wow.
And I thought, that's a rare commodity that's true about. And I got a lot of love in that village. So I tried to raise a culture at Compassion of love. I learned about joy. You don't think of the poor necessarily as being joyful, but they have incredible joy. And the thing they know about joy that we don't tend to have in our arsenal is they know that joy is a decision. It's not dictated by circumstances. You choose to be joyful. And sometimes it's a very, very courageous decision when things are really, really tough. They taught me about hope. Hope also is not dictated by circumstances. It's a decision that you make. And I think as president of Compassion, even in hard times, I always recognize it's my responsibility to be the guardian of hope. It's my responsibility to always see the silver lining as the storm passes, to be the one that keeps everybody's eyes on the mission and on what it's all about. I learned from them to be generous, the power of giving and receiving of all things. The worst thing you could be in my village was selfish. To withhold from your brother in his time of need was just unacceptable behavior. So the cruelest thing you could have done to me as a little guy would have been to give me 2 pieces of candy, because I would have looked at them in my hand and said, well, okay, you put them in my hand. You must have meant one of them for me, but surely not both. Now what am I going to do? 1 piece of candy and all these friends. They, for us outdoor type, they taught me some very important things about strength. If God made you strong, it's not for you. It's for you to be there for those who are weak. And if God made you courageous, and courage was a very important asset in a village where death was all around us and nature could not only feed us, but could also kill us. we learned that if God made you brave, it's not for you. It's for you to be there for those who are frightened.
My goodness.
And those values found their way into my spirit as a young guy. And eventually, when I emerged as a leader within Compassion's context, I drew back on my village and those values to shape Compassion, what it does, who it is, how it behaves. I owe it all to people who believed in me before I knew to believe in myself.
Man. Is there a particular, like, you think back on your childhood, like any like wildlife encounters that really stick out to you as like you had to call on perhaps that courage that you were talking about? Because I mean, like you said, I mean, you're in nature and nature can be a blessing to you, but it can also be harmful to you. Is there a particular story that you remember where you had a fearful encounter with nature?
Many, actually. I nearly died about 12 times as a little boy. Our closest hospital was 100 miles away. That's where the nearest white children were. And so, diseases nearly killed me. Malaria was a big killer. We had snakes in our village that could bite you and kill you in 30 minutes. I lost many of my little African buddies to what we called pencil vipers. They weren't any bigger than a pencil, but they were deadly. Africa is about the only place, and now that I'm in America, it's extremely rare. I still hunt and fish anything that moves. Not everybody at Compassion does what I do. But in Africa, as you hunted, you had to be alert to the fact that you were also being hunted.
Oh, man.
And so you're concentrating on that gazelle. Meanwhile, a panther is concentrating on you. So you learn to hunt with both the windshield and the rearview mirror to stay alive. But ironically, the thing that nearly took my life, the closest I came to death, was when I was about 9 years old. And of all things, the thing that nearly killed me was ants, army ants.
Oh my goodness!
These guys, we were out on the open savanna, and these guys would come in a stream of about 5 to 6 inches wide, hundreds, thousands, millions of ants. And they would just work their way across slowly. You could walk faster than them, of course, but they would work their way across the prairie, and anything that was in their path had to get out of the way or they could kill it. So we would run out there with torches soaked in kerosene and burn the leaders, trying to get them to disperse and head in maybe a different direction instead of straight at us. And I remember they would audibly hiss. They would spread out for several feet, and then they would regroup, and we hoped it was now heading in a different direction. Sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. We slept with our bedposts in the cans of kerosene, number 10 cans of kerosene, because these things could cross any body of water, but they couldn't cross kerosene. So they wouldn't come up onto your bed if your bedposts were in cans of kerosene. So we used to keep watch on them. The drums would communicate, across the village when ants were present. We put chemicals around the base of our house to try to get them to come in. But what nearly took me out when I was about 9 years old was when they came one time at night, in the dead of night. And it was so hot that I had kicked my sheets off of my bed in the heat. And that's when they came. And with the sheets on the floor, well, they climbed up the sheets and they came up my body. And I didn't feel any of them until one of them went across my cheek.
I feel like there's one on my cheek right now.
You feel it? I know. I thought it was a mosquito. So I slapped it. And I don't know how organized they are, but that must have been the invisible signal. Panic, everybody, bite. So dozens of them bit all at the same time.
Oh, my gosh.
And these rascals didn't just pinch your skin. They injected poison. And so, and then they would lock their head onto you. So my body swelled up. I mean, I looked like the Michelin Man within a few hours. We couldn't pull them off. My parents, I went screaming into their room, and they pulled them off with tweezers, one at a time.
Oh my goodness.
Literally tearing my skin because they would not let go. I remember the whole village gathered around and prayed for the little white guy, that he wouldn't die. I can remember their prayers even in the midst of my great pain. And yeah, I swelled up, and they didn't figure they risked taking me across the prairie to the hospital. So we did it with just prayer. And within a few days, my swelling had gone down, and we'd pulled all of the ant heads out of my skin, and I went forward.
Wow.
So I was reading about your podcast, and you were saying, so what outdoor adventures did you go through that have had an impact on the rest of your life? And I'm like, well, the way this had an impact on the rest of my life is it gave me a cause. Now I step on every ant I can see. Oh, I will go all the way across the street if I think there's an anthill on the sidewalk on the other side.
It's funny as I've never, you think about Africa, you think about all of the animals that can kill you, all the large game, all of these things. I would have never in my life thought ants would have been what have almost got you.
That's amazing.
That was what nearly took me out. And interesting, with the hospital so far away, every little cut you got, you couldn't run in and get taken care of at the hospital.
Yeah.
So if you needed stitches on your cut, well, you had to use nature again. And here's a chance where army ants became a useful thing instead of a danger. I don't know, you probably can't see, but on my hand right here is a scar.
Yeah.
And that was from getting bit by a mongoose, which I was teasing, and I deserved the bite. But there was this cut on my hand, and what they decided to do for me is to close that cut by using army ants. So they would catch the big ones. They would have
suture.
They would have a head on them about the size of my little finger, and what we'd do is, while they're still alive, we'd put them on opposite sides of that cut, and they would clamp down in their anger. And then we would pull the body off, and the head would stay there like a suture. So it took about 6 ants to close that scar.
That's incredible.
There. And so now whenever I look at my hand and I see that scar, I think, are there any ants around here? And can I get even with those rascals? Growing up in Africa, that's not a very noble tale of some lion that hunted me down or something. But that is the closest I came to death.
I don't think I've ever heard that phrase that you got bit by a mongoose and sutured it with an ant head. Yeah,
that's a new one.
That's a new one.
A mongoose bite with army ant heads.
That's incredible.
That's fascinating. So tell us a little bit how you got connected with Compassion. That Compassion is the largest nonprofit in the world. And much of that is because of your leadership and God using you to reach so many. How did you get connected with that? And tell us about what your passion is for that.
Well, it's not the largest, but it's the 8th largest according to Forbes. When I found it back in 1977, it was a tiny little outfit about the size of a 7-Eleven store. We had 30 employees in Compassion at that time. It was a 25-year-old organization, but it had grown very slowly in its earliest years. And I didn't join it because it was big or great, but I joined it because I could see the seeds of greatness in it. What it was doing really resonated with my spirit and what I thought was important in the world. And that, guys, came from the very same thing we've been talking about. It came out of my village. While they had these remarkable values and while they shaped my heart and soul, they were also very vulnerable to poverty. And we were agriculturalists and hunters and fishermen. And let me move over out of the sun a second here. And we needed We needed rain 6 months out of the year. We had to have rain because we didn't have money for irrigation. So we needed rain. We needed the locust plagues not to come and destroy us. We didn't have money for fertilizer. So we walked the tightrope of survival, basically, in that village. And as you can imagine, when people are on the brink of life or death, oftentimes it's death that has the victory. And I watched a lot of death around me. These people had these tremendous values, but they were very, very vulnerable. And of course, the children are the most vulnerable and most likely to die. And so I watched as a little boy many of my little childhood buddies die. Because we had no electricity, we had no way to embalm them. The very day that they died, they had to be buried. Wow. And the village would gather around the campfire in the evening, and we would tell the stories of these little guys, what they had wanted to become, the kind things they did, the special things they did, and we would just weep over them. I thought that that's how the whole world worked. You know, I saw it in the animal kingdom. I saw that the young die and the elderly die, and I thought that's probably how it is with people too. Until later, when I came to America, finally at age 15, I discovered that they died of something called poverty. They didn't die of malaria. They didn't die of snake bite. They died because there were no ways to take care of them, to keep them alive when they should have been. There was no reason for any of them to starve. And so I watched poverty ravage my village and the people that I loved most. By the time I was 15 years old and came to America to live, half of all my childhood buddies had died. Wow. And I had cried myself to sleep hundreds of nights. You know, I used to lie in bed listening to the drums and the funeral services of my little buddies around the campfire. And I would just cry at the loss of another friend. My eyes would fill up with tears, I remember, and it would spill down onto my pillow, and my ears would fill with tears. Eventually, I would drift to sleep, but a little while later, a couple of days later, it would be another one of my friends. And by the time I came to America, half of them were gone, and I had cried myself to sleep. Poverty had become my arch enemy. To this day, you know, if I and poverty were two little guys fighting in a playground, and the teacher jumped in between us and said, hey, break this up. Who started this? I could honestly say he did. He broke my heart when I was a child, and all I'm doing with the rest of my life is fighting back. Mm-hmm. And so by God's grace, I stumbled into compassion just as I discovered my enemy is poverty. I now understand what it is. I now know that none of that death needed to happen. I've lived in America now for about 8 years when I discovered that. And I realized there's plenty of food. Nobody needs to starve. There's plenty of medicine. Nobody needs to die of disease. We just all who have access to those things need to care about those who don't. Mm. And I began to realize I know these American people. When I first came and I saw all that they had, I was so angry. I thought, what is wrong with you people? You know, you have all of this, all the food you can handle, all the medicine, you've got the security, you've got all the health care you could ever want, and you don't care. And after I lived in America for a while, I began to realize, you know what, you're wrong, Wes. They do care. The issue is they don't know. They don't know what's going on. They don't know about it. And when they do, they really, really care. They might be the most generous people in all of history of mankind. And I thought, well, now I've lived in America long enough that I know children in poverty. They raised me. Now I know these people on the other side of the world, and I know their hearts and I know their generosity. What I know that most people don't know is they actually need each other. What the poor have, this love and joy and hope, these people need. even though they live in nice houses and drive cars, they still need love and hope and joy that the poor know. And the poor need what these people have. They need some of that money in their pockets to buy food and fertilizer and things for their lives to be safe. And I thought, you know what? Somehow with my life, because what I know, I need to bridge these two worlds. And I was thinking, what does that mean? Does that mean I have to be an ambassador? Does that mean I have to work for the United Nations? And I was like, oh, I hope not. I don't want to sit in an office somewhere. And then I stumbled into compassion. And they say, I asked them, well, so what do you guys do? And they said, well, our enemy is poverty. And I'm like, whoa, I am in on that. My second question is, what do you do about poverty? And they said, well, we kind of serve as a bridge between children in poverty, their families in the church, and people in America who want to reach out and want to help them. I don't know if you can imagine this, but it's a two-way bridge between these two groups of people. And I said, imagine it. I've already thought it.
They were speaking your language.
They were, I mean, what the great relief that came to me was, it's already going on. Here is an amazing little organization that is already doing it. I don't have to be an ambassador. I don't have to be a diplomat. I don't have to go start some organization to do this. I'm just going to throw my hat in the ring and help this place become as big as it can be, to help as many children as possible, and as good as it can be, to focus in on the things that really matter in poverty. And guys, that was 45 years ago.
Wow.
And I've never looked back. I've watched it grow from 25,000 sponsored children to 2.2 million sponsored children.
Incredible.
Imagine my joy to have found a place doing exactly what God had already laid on my heart as a young guy needed to be done.
That's so good.
That's generational impact. I mean, you're changing the world. I mean, honestly, that's incredible.
Yeah.
It was such a gift to me, and I have had such a remarkable life. I consider myself one of the most fortunate people I know, because the things that matter most to me, I've been able to give all of my energy, all of my thought, and all of my passion to for decades.
Yeah.
And I watched the church waking up to the importance of this. Nobody denies anymore that the poor exist, or that God expects us to do something about them. What most people are asking is, so what can I do? You know, it's been said, all that's necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. And I've discovered in these 45 years of serving the poor through good-hearted people that good people do nothing for only two reasons. The first reason is they don't know what to do. And the second is they don't know who to trust.
Yep.
And what Compassion has offered the church is, here's something all of us can do. Even little children, even high schoolers can sponsor a child. And we are a very trustworthy organization. We do what we say we do.
Yep. Yeah, we love it. Man, as being a part of that for our church, I was so blessed and thankful to get to spend that time with all those pastors and those guys out at the refuge out in Wyoming.
Brad.
That was a special time and a special group, and that's where I got to hang out with you, Wes. And man, I was so blessed by that. What does that investment from Compassion into those pastors in a place like the Refuge, what does that mean? What does that mean to you and for you? Why is that special and worth doing for you?
Yeah. Well, you know what you saw, Brad, is you saw the heart and soul of Compassion in the span of a few days. Yeah. And Brian, by the way, you should see him fly fish. This guy was the best among us.
Oh, I've been many trips with Brad. People stop what they're doing and watch him cast. He's got a beautiful cast.
He's got a beautiful cast. I had the great honor of being probably 30 yards downstream from him. And I got to the point where I didn't care what I was doing. If a fish was silly enough to bite my fly, well, that was his problem. But I was watching poetry in motion up there. It was amazing.
Move over, Brad Pitt. Brad Hill's got the cast.
There was a river running through it, but there was no Brad Pitt. It was a different Brad.
That's right.
Okay. but I digress, man. I just and that beautiful brown you showed. Oh my goodness. Anyway, you saw compassion in action. What compassion inevitably is trying to do is to find followers of Christ, Christians who understand the mandate to care for the poor, Christians who understand the importance of ministry to children. And if you're looking for Christ following Christians to link up to sponsored children across the world, there is no better place to find them than in the local church.
Yeah.
We do not try to find a sponsor for our 2 million children. We do not look for them among people who have not given their lives to Christ. We don't need their money as much as we need someone who understands that what we're doing is discipling these little children, ultimately releasing them from poverty in Jesus' name. And that calls on prayer. Yeah, it calls on some financial generosity, $38 a month, but it calls on letters written to that little child to say, I'm watching you grow. I believe in you. You know, the Jesus that loves you also loves me. The Jesus who died on the cross for you also died on the cross for me. And so there is no more strategic and loving place to find those kind of sponsors than in the local church. Now, how do you get access to the local church? Well, you do it through relationships by helping pastors do what God has called them to do, disciple their people. And how do you live out your faith in a hurting world like this? What is our responsibility to the poor? What is our responsibility to children? And our passion is, how can we help a local pastor in the mandate that God has given him with a viable, credible way for them to actually bring missions to life? You know, it's not a missionary all across the world, but it's a little child from a poverty-stricken family being ministered to by a little local church. And you can step into it with your prayers, with your financial support, with letters to that little child. And so what was going on there? And you probably hardly picked up on it, Brad, because we weren't there to badger people with some sort of you need to do this or feel guilty about yourself. We just wanted to find who among you has a heart to care about these kinds of things, that maybe compassion is a viable option for your people to live out their faith.
Right.
And so that went on around, Brad, you and I, that went on across the table. It went around the campfire. It didn't happen in the fishing stream because the water was too loud. But between you and me, Brad, didn't surprise me when you and I had a chance to talk on this podcast, because we had a meeting of hearts, not only about fishing, but about you as a missions pastor, and how do you bring that into the homes and into the lives of the people of your church. And I could see in your eyes, you totally got it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so excited about, this project that we're getting to be a part of, which I hope grows into more, not just sponsorships. Ultimately, church planting is one of the things off in the distance that I want us to be a part of. But that's long-term vision for me. But that's another thing, and having you on here. I mean, there are a lot of people that, that aren't a lot of people that aren't a part of my church that listen to this podcast that I wanted to hear from you and hear your passion and your story, because it's infectious, and man, your voice is so, we just cherish your wisdom. And so just thankful for these stories, from you. What, let me ask you this, Wes, you've talked about, you just really learning how to fly fish. And I know you're in a great place for that in Colorado.
Yeah.
But you're also a hunter, man. You love hunting and fishing. So what's maybe some of your favorite game to go after when hunting, Wes?
Well, I next week I will be antelope hunting in Colorado. I love hunting antelope. They are so smart. They got such good eyes. One of the things the Africans taught me was how to approach animals that are, highly defensive. And where you hunt antelope, you don't have a lot of rocks to hide behind. You don't have a lot of trees. I mean, sometimes it looks like lunar landscape. They're out on the open prairie. They've got eyesight they tell me is the equivalent of 8-power binoculars. So you've got to spot them. you've got to now read. You've got to read the wind. You've got to read the terrain. You've got to put the sun behind you so that they're reluctant to look into the sun, but it gives you a tiny advantage. Even though there's almost no cover, you've got to figure out how to read the ravine. If there is anything, how to blend in with whatever sagebrush or cover there is. I mean, it's like playing chess with a really, really smart critter. And, with antelope, you're lucky if you get a shot under about 400 yards. So you've got to be a good shot. You've got to have steady nerves. You got to learn how to squeeze that trigger and not jerk it. You got to control your breathing. You got to control your heart rate like a sniper. Yeah, I'm looking forward to next week hunting them in Colorado on the plains about an hour east of us. Yeah. Love antelope hunting. I've already been deer hunting in Nebraska this year. Been pheasant hunting up in South Dakota. Just got back from that a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I think you were up there with my good friend Josh Farmer.
Yes, Josh, absolutely. I hunted right alongside Josh. He's a very good shot, by the way.
Yeah.
Yep, but we and that again, we weren't fly fishing, but it was a group of pastors. Yeah. And we were just giving them an outdoor experience and the chance to talk about it around the campfire.
Why is that, Wes? Why is that like that? I think that's something I want to for us to hit on is why is that mode of that rest? So why does that translate so well? Why is that so helpful that you guys see? Whether it's South Dakota or Montana or Wyoming, what is it about those experiences that's helpful?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I think it is it's a huge gift to a pastor. Pastors work incredibly hard. They rarely get a lot of gratitude or rarely get complimented. And you know why it is, guys. Everybody assumes everybody else is doing that. And so nobody does. And being a pastor is it's a very hard work. They don't make a great deal of money. They carry the load, the hurts of other people around it. They're the most selfless people there are. And when you say to a pastor, I understand you love the outdoors. I understand you love to hunt. You love to fish. Can we give you the gift of a few days of that? You come and let us just love on you. We don't let them clear their own dishes. We don't let them do the dishes. We don't let them make their own beds. I mean, for a few days, we want them to live like kings. And we want to give them not just a chance to hunt or fish, but to give them a world-class experience in some of the most beautiful places, hunting whatever game it is in the most wonderful, adventurous ways to do it.
Yeah.
So mostly what we're trying to do is love on pastors, watch for those that God has moved in their heart about the poor or about the importance of children. And if we have the chance, speak into that. I think it's one of the most strategic and loving things that can be done. It's good for pastors. It's good for their church when we send them back restored. And it's good for compassion when the doors are opened and people are given a chance to reach out and sponsor a child and bless a church somewhere all the way across the world.
Yeah, Mark and I certainly benefited greatly from our time there in Wyoming, and the guys at Brian and the team at Refuge were just phenomenal. The way they did things with excellence, and it was a beautiful place. But man, their spirit of service and the way that they took care of us it was just exceptional. And it's been a while since I felt that appreciated for sure. Yep.
I had the last week, about 4 days ago, they disbanded the end of the season. Yeah. And so they had a farewell banquet to all of their staff. Yeah. And I sent a video message into them, and I said, the setting was beautiful. The fishing was wonderful. Loved the campfire, loved everything about it. But the thing that really won our hearts was how you guys just loved on us. The way you served us food, the way you listened to us in conversations. the trail rides. Oh my goodness. It was a great experience, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
What is it about getting people around a campfire that allows them to open up? I mean, it seems like that just is an invitation to conversation.
Yeah.
For me, it opens up my heart immediately because I spent virtually every evening of my childhood around the bonfire with my village. That's what we did in the evenings. Was everybody gathered around? We sang songs. We told stories. The greatest skill you could have in my village beyond hunting and fishing was the ability to tell a story.
That's awesome.
And so for me, it warms my heart immediately. But for the pastors and other leaders that we bring around there, it just gives them a safe place away from the pressures, a safe place away from the responsibilities. If they want to do it, just sit and watch the sparks fly and listen to the conversation, or jump in with a thought and have 10 other brothers around there that say, you know what, you shouldn't feel unusual about that. That's exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
And when I had this problem in my church, here's what I did about it. And I just sit back and I listen to pastors blessing pastors. And it doesn't happen as well in a conference room. It doesn't happen as well across the table, but there is something magical about a fire that takes us to another place. It opens up our minds. It opens up our hearts. It gives us the ability to speak clearly without feeling like my speech has to be what I'm saying doesn't have to be a prepared speech. I can actually think out loud, my mouth 1 second behind my brain.
Yeah.
And the fellowship is really, really sweet. Yeah. So I know where it comes from for me, but you guys are outdoorsmen. What is it for you, Brad?
Well, there is something about, you said, staring at the sparks. I mean, I think there's something probably mesmerizing about that kind of, softens you up and kind of gets you to think, whereas it's not distracting, like say a television or a ball game or something like that. You know what I mean? So there's something about the fire that keeps your attention, so to speak, but also enables you to think about whatever's going on inside. So there is something about it, I think, that's mesmerizing, but there's nothing to me quite like a fellowship around the fire, because there aren't other distractions. We often jokingly call it caveman TV, right? We're just kind of staring at the fire, and man, you just, there's something you want to say, and you work up the gumption to say whatever that is. And usually, like you said, someone else goes, I've had that same experience, or I thought I was the only one. And rarely does that happen, around the football screen, watching football, or, whatever other activities that involves the television, but it does nearly always happen around a fire. So I cherish those conversations in the evening around the fire for sure.
One of the things, because we're way out there in the middle of nowhere and the congregations aren't there, and whatever is in the way, we often see pastors smoke their first cigar. They're sitting there with the very first one they ever smoked. It's so fun to watch, because you see them suddenly become, C.S. Lewis. They suddenly become deeply philosophical. They're saying stuff they never said before, because there's something about a cigar that says, well, let me tell you what I think. I get such a kick out of them. I can't stand them because I think they taste horrible, but I love watching other guys smoke their first one and watching what it does to the fluency of their conversation and their deep thinking.
Oh, that's hilarious.
It certainly loosens up the exterior and enables you to think and contemplate much deeper with a pipe or with a cigar. That's funny.
Yeah, a pipe makes them even more intolerable. Now they really do think they know something.
Oh, well, Wes, man, it's been such a great. I'm so glad to get to catch up with you for once. I enjoyed our time together. As we close with this conversation, Wes, how do we direct people to partner with Compassion who are listeners, who are listening right now?
Yeah, if what we've talked about kind of rings true with you, or if you ask yourself, what in the way I'm living my faith, how is it impacting the broader world? How is it impacting the poor? And you realize maybe I ought to be doing more, or I ought to maybe add this to what I am doing. We at Compassion would be honored to love on a little child on your behalf. And so you can go to compassion.com on the internet. Compassion is big enough now that there are always children that are waiting for a sponsor. Right. And you can probably, almost guarantee you could choose a country that your church has a mission work in, that you might be able to go on a work team or something to go actually be there. Right. Or a place where you might go on vacation or on business. I can tell you this: if you can get to the country where your child lives, Compassion will get you face to face with your child. We'll either take you to the child in their village, or if we have time, we'll arrange for the child to come to you wherever you are, along with their pastor and some members of their family for the adventure of it.
Yeah.
Or if you're not big into the internet, you can still do it the old-fashioned way on the telephone. You can dial 1-800-336-7676, 336-7676. That'll ring right in Compassion's office, and somebody on Compassion staff who knows all the answers to whatever you got in your mind can help you get started with sponsoring a child.
Yeah,
I can guarantee you there's very little closer to the heart of God, very little closer to the priorities of the kingdom of God than reaching out to one of these, what we often refer to as the least of these, the little ones that Jesus said, whatever you do for one of them, you did it for me.
Right.
That was me you wrote that letter to. That was me that you sent that money to. That was me that you prayed for. That's about as close to the kingdom as you get.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'll make sure to have all of that in our show notes too, that, people really interested will have those links and so forth that people can follow through. Yeah, man. Well, one final question. We always close with what's your next adventure?
My next adventure, I'm on my way tomorrow morning to Georgia, where I serve on a board of a church planting organization called Stadia. I will be with them through the week. On Saturday, I'll be home, and I will go out to the plains of Colorado, antelope hunting. And that's other than living on this little ranch that I'm on, which has always got something that needs fixing. Those are my outdoor fun things that'll be coming up in the next 2. So,
going after the antelope. I hope maybe you can send us a picture of maybe an antelope that you bagged.
I will. They go straight in the freezer. I'm not looking for a big one on the wall. I got too many of those, but I'm looking for something that looks like it would be good in spaghetti or good in lasagna.
Some good eating. I like it.
Good eating.
Wes, thank you so much for joining us today.
You guys, I love the idea of your podcast. I'm honored that you would invite me to be on it. Brad, what a joy it was fishing with you. Brad, what a joy to meet you. I pray that God will bless you for what you're doing. It's very, very important. And I was honored to get to be a part of it today.
Excellent. Well, we hope, as we always close this out saying, we hope these stories like yours, Wes, encourage people. We hope they challenge folks, and certainly I would imagine they would be challenged today. And ultimately, I appreciate the way you reflected on each of your stories and your experiences and how they've certainly shaped you and shaped ultimately Compassion. And so you took time to reflect on those experiences, and they they shaped the way you led and the way that you continue to lead and carry yourself. So we hope this encourages people to reflect on their own experiences, their own upbringing, on how they lead and how they interact, and maybe even write these stories down. That's ultimately, you said, one of the best gifts that you can have around the fire in Africa was being a good storyteller. So that's something else that we hope to kind of perpetuate with this podcast, is for people to share stories and to tell stories. And this is we don't have a campfire, but this is as close as we can get right now, is around these microphones for this podcast, for people on their commutes to hear and tell stories.
And just one follow-up thought. If what I've been talking about kind of intrigues you, I've got 2 books that you might want to call.
All right.
One of them is called Too Small to Ignore: Why
Okay.
Children Are the Next Big Thing. I tell my story of growing up in that little African village in that book. And you can get that off Amazon. That's probably the easiest.
I'll put a link on the website for that.
Oh, perfect. The other one is called Just a Minute. And I maintain that if you can shape the life of a child in just a minute, if God stands a child in front of you, it might be a divine appointment that you might be the one who says the right thing, does the right thing, that launches that child's life.
Awesome.
And it's a story of 68 people who remember the minute their life got launched like that. Easy read, 3 pages each story. It's a perfect bathroom read.
There you go. There we go. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Wes. We really appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah. God bless you guys. Thanks for the chance to be with you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.